The rain had begun before dawn, a slow, steady rhythm that wrapped the small town of Maple Hollow in a cocoon of soft gray. The streets were slick, the air cool and filled with the faint scent of wet earth. Inside a narrow house on Willow Street, an old woman named Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, her hands curled around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. It had been 6 months since her husband, Robert, had passed. For 53 years, they had shared a life, raising children, planting gardens, laughing at the little absurdities of the world. Now, the house felt like a shell, filled with echoes of laughter that no longer had a source. The sound of the rain on the roof was too steady, too constant. It left too much room for remembering. Eleanor had never imagined herself alone. Robert had always been there, his presence like the heartbeat of their home. The way he whistled in the mornings, the sound of his boots by the door, the smell of sawdust from his workshop, these things had made up the rhythm of her life. When that rhythm stopped, silence became its own kind of noise. That morning, as she stared out the window at the garden Robert had loved so much, she noticed how untamed it had become. Weeds tangled through the rose bushes, and the bench beneath the oak had begun to tilt, one leg sinking into the soft earth. It hurt her to look at it, and yet she couldn't look away. She had promised him she would keep the garden alive. But she hadn't been able to bring herself to touch it. Every flower felt like a piece of him, every wilted leaf a reminder of what time takes, no matter how much love tries to hold it still. She sighed and pressed her palm against the cool window glass. "I'm sorry, Robert," she whispered. A knock came at the door, sudden and sharp enough to startle her. When she opened it, she found a boy, no more than 12 or 13, standing there, soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he should be there at all. "Mrs. Taylor?" he asked. I'm Liam. I live down the street. My mom said you might need help with your yard. I do odd jobs sometimes." Eleanor blinked, caught between surprise and hesitation. The boy's shoes squelched on the porch, and water dripped from the brim of his cap. "In this weather?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Rain doesn't bother me much." Something about his earnestness, the way he stood there, shoulders drawn but eyes steady, made her smile faintly. She stepped aside. "Well, come in before you catch cold." Liam shuffled inside, wiping his feet awkwardly. He looked around the house as though afraid to disturb its quiet. She poured him some tea and handed him a towel. As he sipped, she asked, "Did your mother really send you over?" He nodded. "Yeah. She said you used to bring her flowers sometimes, when she was sick last year. She thought maybe I could return the favor." Eleanor felt a small ache in her chest. She remembered that now, his mother, Grace. She'd brought her a basket of tulips when Grace had the flu. Robert had said, "It's the least we can do for a neighbor." That had been their way. Small kindnesses, offered without expectation. When the rain eased into a drizzle, Liam stood and said, "I can fix up your garden a bit if you want. I've got tools at home." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "I'd appreciate that." And so, over the next few weeks, he came, after school, on weekends, sometimes early in the mornings before the sun had burned off the mist. He weeded the flower beds, trimmed the hedges, and fixed the leg of the garden bench. He was clumsy sometimes, but always careful. Eleanor would bring him lemonade or sandwiches and sit on the porch, watching him work. It was strange, she thought, how the silence between them didn't feel empty. Once, as he raked leaves beneath the oak, he asked, "Was this your husband's garden?" "Yes," she said, her voice soft. "He loved it more than anything. Said the earth listens better than most people do." Liam smiled. "My grandpa says that too. He plants tomatoes every year, even though nobody eats them." "Why?" she asked. "Because he says growing things reminds him that life keeps going." Eleanor looked out at the roses, their petals trembling in the light wind. Your grandpa sounds wise. He shrugged. He's just lonely, I think. Something about the way he said it made her heart twist. She saw, for a moment, that loneliness wasn't only the weight of years, it could settle on young shoulders too. Summer came, and with it, color. The garden burst back to life under Liam's hands. Wildflowers leaned toward the sun, and the air was filled with the hum of bees. Eleanor began spending more time outside, pulling small weeds, watering the beds, talking to Liam about the things she and Robert had once planned to do. One afternoon, she found a small wooden birdhouse on the porch railing. It was painted in bright blue and yellow, with a tiny heart carved on the front. "Did you make this?" she asked when Liam arrived. He nodded, cheeks reddening. "My grandpa helped a bit. I thought it might look nice in the garden." Eleanor touched the little heart. "It's beautiful," she said. "Robert would have loved it." That evening, she hung it on a low branch of the oak tree. When the first bird settled inside, she smiled through tears. Weeks turned into months. Autumn brushed the garden gold. Liam kept coming, even after the air turned crisp and the evenings grew shorter. They raked leaves together, drank hot cocoa, and talked about everything from school to the stars. One day, as they worked, Liam said, "My mom says you're different now. Happier." Eleanor looked at him and smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. You've brought a bit of life back into this place, Liam. And into me." He grinned. "I guess your husband would be happy about that." She nodded, eyes glistening. He would. He believed kindness always comes full circle. That winter was harsh. Snow piled high, and the garden fell quiet beneath its white blanket. But Eleanor didn't feel the same emptiness she once had. She had letters from Liam, short notes he'd drop in her mailbox, telling her about school or how he couldn't wait to see the flowers again in spring. She replied to every one. When spring returned, Liam came back with his usual energy. Together they replanted the garden, added new colors, daisies, tulips, and marigolds. Eleanor laughed more than she had in years. But life, she knew, has a rhythm of arrivals and departures. By late summer, Liam came one afternoon with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "We're moving," he said quietly. "My mom got a new job. It's in another town." The words hit her like a sudden wind. "Oh," she said softly. "That's wonderful for your mother." He looked down. "I don't want to leave the garden." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You'll grow new ones, wherever you go. That's what life does, it plants us in new soil sometimes." He tried to smile, but his eyes shone with tears. On his last day, they stood together beneath the oak. The birdhouse still hung there, its paint faded by rain and sun. "I'll take care of it," she promised. "And I'll remember you every time the flowers bloom." He nodded. "And I'll remember you, Mrs. Taylor. And Mr. Taylor too." When he left, the garden felt quieter again, but not empty. Years passed. Eleanor grew friendlier. The garden became a little wilder each season, though she tended what she could. The oak tree grew thicker, its roots strong and sure. Then one spring morning, after a long winter, a young man appeared at her gate. He was tall now, his face older but unmistakably familiar. "Liam," she breathed. He grinned. "Hey, Mrs. Taylor. I told you I'd come back." She laughed, tears welling. "Look at you. You've grown." He helped her into the garden, his hand steady beneath her arm. They walked slowly past the flowers, blooming in riotous color. "I wanted to show you something," he said, leading her to the oak. Hanging beside the old birdhouse was a new one, painted blue and yellow, just like before, but with two hearts carved this time. "I made it with my grandpa," he said softly. "Thought your garden deserved another." Eleanor reached out, fingers tracing the carved hearts. "It's perfect," she whispered. They sat on the bench together, the same one Robert had built. The sun slipped between the leaves, and for a moment, Eleanor felt her husband's presence, quiet, warm, content. "Liam," she said, after a while, "you brought love back here. You may not know it, but you healed something I didn't think could be healed." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You did the same for me. When I met you, I didn't have many friends. My dad had just left. I didn't even like talking to people much. But being here, it felt like something good again." She smiled, her heart full. "Then we saved each other, didn't we?" He nodded. "I think so." That summer was their last together. Eleanor passed away quietly one morning, in her sleep, the scent of roses drifting through her open window. At her funeral, the garden was in full bloom. Liam stood beside the oak tree, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. He placed them on the bench and whispered, "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. For everything." Years later, when Liam had children of his own, he brought them to Maple Hollow. The house on Willow Street had new owners, but the garden still stood, vibrant, alive. The oak had grown wide and strong, its branches still holding two birdhouses side by side. Liam lifted his daughter up so she could see them. "Those," he said softly, "belong to someone who taught me that love never really leaves. It just changes form." The little girl looked up, eyes wide. "Like the flowers?" He smiled. "Exactly like the flowers." And as the wind rustled through the leaves, carrying the scent of roses and soil, it was easy to believe that somewhere within that quiet garden, love still lingered, rooted deep, blooming endlessly in the spaces it had once touched.